Hello, everybody. My name is Simon, partner and head of growth at Founders. Founders is a startup studio. For you that do not exactly know what that means, I understand. A startup studio for us is a company that builds companies. Basically, what we do is we act as co-founders, and then we also are able to put in the capital needed for the first 2 years of building a company. After that, it then goes on and become like an independent company of its own, where we are still owners. That was just a short introduction on Founders, but welcome here to this first session of our Founders Field Notes, where we will talk today about growth and about how we will adapt to the whole Corona world in terms of how to grow companies, and especially, of course, how to grow these young companies, these fast moving companies, and of course also as they mature and get older and bigger. And today I'm very happy to have very skilled and experienced people with me to discuss this topic. And in just a bit I will let them all introduce themselves, so you have a bit of idea of where they come from and what they stand on in terms of their input to this panel today. Just a short intro to how we will do it. We will start with a couple of questions to go into, and then there will be opportunities for you to ask questions. So potentially actually already now ask the questions. Then Sarah here, who is my colleague from Founders, head of brand and community, will be able to feed in the questions that she finds worthy, and then we will take those. We'll take a few more of the prepared areas and questions, and then we will take another round of questions from you that are listening out there. Good. Have I forgotten something, Sarah?
Don't think so.
Very good. So first of all, let me introduce you to Mike. Mike, could you please
hello everyone,
tell us about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is May, and I am a partner and advisor in the company called T-Bone Advisory. We specialize in helping SaaS companies go from potentially no marketing to having marketing as a revenue driving function in their company and scale internationally. So we do that both through strategic and tactical advisory, as well as recruitment, because we believe that getting the right talent in is a crucial part in this. We normally work with SaaS companies that are targeting the mid-market and the enterprise market and have a sales cycle around 2 to 12 months. So that's what I'll be speaking from today. So it might not apply to everyone, what I'm saying. Previously, I started in Falcon.io, social media management platform, back in 2013, and was on their hockey stick growth up until 2016, where I joined Zetland, which is a digital media business, for a couple of years as head of marketing and biz dev, and now have an advisory with my two dear colleagues, Ronja and Lars.
Fantastic. Thank you. Nicola, could you give us a short introduction to yourself?
Of course. So I'm Nicola. I am CMO at MyTutor. We are an online tutoring platform where we connect parents and students who need some support with their studies with university students from the top universities who are subject specialists and can really help them with those tricky topics, areas that they're finding challenging. Our main focus is around one-to-one personalized tuition for GCSE and A-level. So you can imagine with the recent events, it's been quite a topsy-turvy time for us because schools have been closed and exams cancelled in the UK. So it's been a very interesting space for marketers to work in as we adapt to the ever-changing story of what's going to be happening next. I've been in marketing for about 20 years, to give away my age, and I first met you guys, I think, in Dublin at SaaStock, which is still my favourite event, and unfortunately I need to get back in the SaaS space so I can head back there next year.
Very good, very good. And your background, Nicola, before MyTutor?
I was at GoCardless for 3 years, which is a fintech company focusing on direct debit. And prior to that, I worked in a whole range of industries, everything from business cards, where I worked with Moo, to beauty, to gambling and sport. So I've covered pretty much most of them.
Very good. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And let's move on to Sean. Could you please give us a bit of an intro to you?
Yeah. Hey, Simon. Thanks for having me. My name is Sean Percival. I'm an American, although I'm living in quiet Norway these days, isolating and quarantining like we should be, not like those crazy Swedes. My background is a bit of a mixture, half operational, mostly in marketing capacity. I was CMO of a company called Whereby, makes a product very similar to Zoom. I was a vice president of marketing of a little site called MySpace. If you're over 30, maybe you remember that. Simon's like, yes. The good days.
Exactly.
And these days I also do a lot of early stage investing. So I've invested in about 120 early stage companies. I'm a partner at a Nordic and Baltic fund investing in early stage companies. Really nice to be here. Love to talk about early growth tactics, MarTech, what tools should I use, what approach. So if you have any questions like that, fire it in the chat. Happy to try and answer it for you. Thanks again for having me.
Fantastic. Sounds so good. And actually, like in Norway, I just heard that you just are opening up for the cafes and the bars today, right?
Yeah, the bars, the salons open, half the schools are, open. So we're almost back to normal, very close.
Also, like you being here when the bars are finally open, I think is shows commitment.
It's the only way Norwegians can have fun and make friends and get a date. They need the bar. So it's like, it's a shy people. They need that bar. So I'm glad it's back open.
That's good. That's good. All right, then finally, Natasha from Barbados.
I wish, but I can miss it. Hey, I'm Tash. I work at Seedcamp, leading European early stage investment fund. Got a portfolio of over 350 companies, which includes a couple of unicorns that you may have heard of, TransferWise, Revolut, UiPath, as well as loads of other awesome businesses. I sort of run all things brand marketing and network Seedcamp, which is an awesome job because I guess I have the responsibility of marketing the fund and a brand itself, but also I do a lot within the portfolio itself. And because we're sector agnostic and because we sort of do a really high volume of deals, averaging around 33 pre-seed and seed deals a year, it means I get to work with companies sort of doing a huge mix of things. I was running marketing and brand in early stage companies before jumping ship and doing it at Seedcamp. And the thought was really, I was sort of seeing the same problems and issues come up time and time again in those businesses, same mistakes. And I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to actually be able to work with a real cross section of companies and try and nip at some of those things like early on in terms of really thinking about story, positioning, brand, and all of those things, even more important now as we adapt to this kind of new world, both in terms of, how we're operating internally as well as what we're putting out externally.
Sounds good. Thank you all. Fantastic background and insights and experience. Look very much forward to talk about growth and marketing, and of course how we adapt to the post-corona world. But let's first of all maybe just jump back to the heydays, the
2 months ago,
the long forgotten world when the bars were still open and there was no corona. Like, could we maybe just like quickly have a talk about like what was actually like the main characteristics of how we were growing our companies at that time? What do you think, Nicola? Like what were you guys like? What would you put like as a headline or a few headlines on how it was to grow a company at that time?
So for us, it was a mix of two things, really. We know that there's demand for tuition in the UK. Our big challenge was that historically, it's always been something you do in person. So parents just weren't aware of this online world, and that tended to be the biggest challenge. So the way we dealt with that was to try and get rid of a lot of preconceptions about what online meant, which was pre-recorded videos done over email. We'd brought in a consumer sales team. So we were talking about the main selling point of MyTutor, which was improvement in grades, and then using our consumer sales team to really explain what online was. And that was really supporting conversion rate. So we were seeing exponential growth looking like 100% year on year. And we'd also started to flip a little bit into the retention piece. Natasha, you probably see this time and time again, but what you tend to see in an early stage company is everything is all about top of the funnel, get loads and loads of people in, and then you forget actually about whether they're actually adding any value. And that was a classic scenario at MyTutor. So we were forgetting to focus on those customers once they'd come in and had their first lesson. And so we were starting to see a real improvement in that lifetime value, which is so critical and also helps you invest more in top of the funnel. So we were starting to get a really good balance there, which was really important. Then obviously everything went upside down because our key opportunity there, everyone's piling in for that pre-exam revision and support. And then as we headed into GCSE and A-levels, schools were closed and everything goes upside down. But what was interesting is that my number one focus for Q1 was to really drive adoption of online. And silver lining for this interesting world we're in is that suddenly it was done for me.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, just jumping in, like, that's the thing that's so fascinating now in terms of, for businesses who have struggled to drive people to purchase and like change behaviors to be online first. Now the sort of boom in terms of just everyone operating that way is sort of unbelievable, and we're, you know, definitely seeing a real mix from across the portfolio. For some of them, you know, like, it could not be like a better time in terms of, and actually part of the problem is not being able to deal with the amount of inbound that they're getting. And to your sort of point, Nicola, and, you know, I actually was doing a session with one of our companies this morning, and they were saying, you know, we think we need to start doing content and we need to start doing marketing, but we have absolutely no capacity to deal with more top of funnel. I'm like, cool, so why should you be doing that right now? Or like, have you actually thought about how you would filter those people through or segment them into different sectors to make it easier, or a sort of journey you'll take them on as you do sort of like, you know, put them in this holding sort of pen type thing until you are ready to deal with them? And they said no. So I'm like, cool, so let's not drive top of funnel right now, you know.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It feels like it's an innate thing you have to do, even when logically everything tells you shouldn't be doing it. And it's changing that mindset.
Yeah.
So much cheaper. Like, it's so much easier.
Exactly.
Retaining your customers once you've got them there, rather than constantly, you know, spending more money on people who may or may not actually be decent long-term customers for you.
How are you viewing the whole thing? Like, or how was it for your clients before Corona? Also having a bit more of a foot in B2B.
Yeah. So I think in the SaaS space on the B2B side, I definitely see that in the past couple of years, you know, there's a lot more funding going on. There's a lot more money flowing around, and companies that have a solid products are actually quite well funded. And there's been a lot of education in the space where they're looking to marketing much earlier to drive growth, actually to the point where we're sometimes like, yeah, you still need sales reps though. Like, you can't just do marketing, and you might not need, you know, a fancy marketing automation system from day one. But I think there's been a lot of education, and it was more about how do you as a CEO, as a co-founder, decide how to invest. What is your first strategic hire in marketing? What kind of purchases should we be making? And that's where it was really about how to spend the money. Because they knew they had to go big on marketing, probably in combination with sales as well. But then how to do it, I think, is still kind of, because everybody's sharing their magic recipes, but it's not a one size fit all. So a lot of optimism. At the same time, everybody has still known that there was a recession coming. Like, we've all known that for years, that it wouldn't continue this way. But I think it's kind of those things like, well, not right now though. You're always focusing on the next quarter, the next 2 quarters ahead. And then you kind of just think that, yeah, it's probably not going to hit our next funding round. Well, right? So I think a lot of optimism, but also much more, I think the founders out there are much more well educated in business than they were before.
But I imagine also for B2B, like before Corona, like we were on an upgoing curve in terms of also matureness from companies towards software and their willingness to actually spend money on this. You're still seeing. It's within certain functions. I think you can see how HR tech has really blossomed in the past couple of years, but you're still seeing a lot of resistance from the buyers there. That is other people, the CIO, that is making those decisions. So there's still some maturity to be had. But yeah, I think this will change.
Yeah, I was going to say really quick, what I was seeing, speaking mostly about Norway. Now, Norway is not known for being a marketing culture, you know, very sort of Nordic, more about modesty. But in the last year, we did see a lot of adoption of marketing automation. I mean, I've been here for like 4 or 5 years now, grinding to try and help founders understand why they should do marketing. And 2018 was a great year. Everyone was getting excited about it. I was seeing a lot more tooling, a lot better sort of segmentation of users, and all the good stuff you need. The only complaint I heard was that, you know, media cost is always increasing. So that was happening before, but I think, as we probably most of us know, media cost is way down now, you know, a lot less spending. So it was like better tooling, complaints about ad cost, And now I'm worried we maybe lose some of that momentum, although the costs have come down, obviously, for various reasons.
Right. Very good. So maybe let's just quickly have some personal anecdotes here about like how do we actually each of us experience kind of like the hit, so to speak, because I think also that you mentioned we knew that the crisis was coming, but of course I think the uniqueness of this crisis is that it happened so fast, right? And it was more or less from one day to the other that markets just more or less closed, and that a lot of customers, both businesses and consumers, simply just like stopped and needed to see what was going on before they dared to act. Could you maybe Sean, like how have you experienced it? Like in some of the companies you've been involved in, like have you some interesting, anecdotes about that?
Yeah, like one kind of funny bad timing story I have, I was with Whereby for the last year and a half, 2 years,
Right.
and we're competing against Zoom. Okay, Zoom's not easy to compete against. Great tech, tons of cash. We had zero funding. We were running the business basically purely on cash flow. So we had some revenue. I spent all of last year, 2019, grinding away on CRO, conversion rate optimization, marketing automation, tooling, analytics, all these things. Grinding and grinding and grinding. I left in January because I wasn't sure if we were going to get the money we needed to like go big. And like literally 2 weeks later, that's when Corona starts hitting. So I can tell you, like, I don't work there anymore, but all I hear is that the revenue is just pouring in. So that was one company that had a very positive effect. I'm sure they could throw away all the work I did for a year and revenue would still be scaling massively because everyone is buying video meetings. We've heard about Zoom with 300 million monthly actives. So that's one business that like is going to do really, really well and not be very capital dependent in this tough time.
Yeah.
I think what is interesting to think about, be it Zoom, Whereby, even Netflix, I'm really curious, like what's the reverb that's going to happen when things go back to normal? All these businesses are going to get hit with like massive churn and all kinds of other challenges. So it's going to be really interesting as we kind of move back and forth. But yeah, I thought that was funny. A company that I literally was grinding, we have to do this stuff. We have to do CRO. I'm sure none of that matters anymore. People are just, you could have the worst funnel ever and people are buying it, because they need this tool so bad.
Yeah, actually have quite similar. So we're investors in a company called Hopin. Hopin being an online events platform. And, we first invested sort of last summer, and Johnny, the founder, raised a really strong round earlier this year, like 6 million from Axel and Northzone. And I remember sort of, we were working on pushing the release out in kind of February, and he was like, it didn't get quite as much media pickup as he would have liked. And then you literally fast forward a month and everybody is desperately clambering to get on Hopin. And there was a feature in The Guardian even this weekend about a couple who got married using it. And you couldn't ask for better publicity than this piece. I mean, it was literally amazing. They do not have a marketing department, and actually they don't need it because the timing for them is so perfect. And actually I think like positioning here is everything. And I remember listening to something that Rory Sutherland said around, the problem with the video call was it was always deemed as a poor man's British Airways. So rather than be seen as like an effort because we're still engaging and we can see each other, it was always seen as the cop out. And so actually, I think this is where like macro climate can have a really interesting impact on repositioning something that was traditionally perhaps thought as lesser, and actually then perhaps having a change in our behavior. So I think it will be really interesting in that sort of respect if these sort of things do start shifting how we respond. I mean, just speaking like personally to us at Seedcamp, there was, for us as well as our portfolio, there was definitely this immediate kind of like just probably like what the fuck moment, because everyone's just like, what is going on? And no one knew quite how to operate. So it was kind of, and we even sort of saw then when we were thinking around like our own brand and messaging and what to put out, that the timing right at the beginning was not right to be proactively doing things that could seem like insensitive, and it was very much about triaging, like how do people feel, what's important right now, what do we have to reshape as an organization in terms of like acclimatizing how we can move and operate in this new world, and then thinking, understanding or believing that people were going to start to come through that initial period, and like what mechanisms and support do you start to put in place in terms of helping them do that, and then now sort of thinking ahead to what does recovery look like, or sort of re-entry to work and to growth and all of these things that temporarily only I think were halted.
But I think actually that's an interesting perspective that we could just dwell a bit with, is like this part about, okay, we all know that some companies are struggling like a lot, and here it's just about like getting whatever traction that you can get. But I think it's interesting to maybe just talk a bit about those companies that are suddenly actually experience like a huge amount of growth, and how do you actually are smart about this in terms of making sure that, as you said, Sean, that when we all hopefully get back to normal of some sort, that we don't just like see tons of churn, right? And that we spend time with the right kind of customers.
I think that's a really, really interesting question. I mean, one thing we found is similar to what both of you, Sean and Natasha, have been talking about. We've obviously seen that all of these big blocks around online have disappeared. So that inertia, I don't want to try something new. This is my comfort zone. This is how it works. This is how it's always worked. I don't want to try this new online world. Suddenly that's been forced upon it. I think one challenge for us is that before, when we did get parents to use our online platform, they thought it was amazing because they imagined that it was a pre-recorded video and they have live chat. They can see the tutor. There's an interactive whiteboard, and they had nothing to compare it against. The challenge we have now is that they're using a ton of other online platforms. So all of the parents are using Zoom through work. They may be using something like Babylon Health. They may be using fitness apps. So we can't just look at our competitors where we know we are we have the leading platform. We've got to start looking at these other services because they're going to up what their minimum threshold is for a great online experience. So actually what we're really focusing on this quarter in product is to make sure we have the best learning space, which was something we probably, not necessarily rightly, but deprioritized before because our parents thought it was amazing because they had nothing else to really compare against. But another one I think is just making sure that you stay really focused on your core customer base during this time. We've seen quite a big influx of adult learners who are furloughed, they're at home, and they're suddenly like, I've got all of this time, I'm going to learn something. So I'm going to spend the next four weeks learning Japanese or psychology or whatever else it might be. And as you often see with sales teams, they're like, Nicola, we've got to focus on mature like adult learners. This is really important for us. We're getting loads of calls in. But obviously there's no longevity in that for us. They're going to be in during this period and then we're going to lose them again. And our platform is focused around secondary school education. And so tempting as it is, we have to say no, stay in our train line. This is where our future is. And this is where we have to stay. Very happy to have inbound contacts, but we're not going to start marketing to them.
And you simply just segmentize, you simply just ask a few questions. And then if you are not like the ones that you're looking for, you're saying sorry.
We still take them, absolutely. But I'm not about to go and do big marketing campaigns to target adult learners because there isn't the longevity there, and that's not what we're set up for. So whilst we know through the registration form what level they're at and what they're looking for, we would never say no as long as we have a tutor that can support their needs. But we're just not actively going to require more.
I think that's a really interesting point from the product experience perspective too. I've seen a lot of people, like a total mix of people, either like using this time to really double down on product and making it better for when things normalize, or people being totally blinded by the kind of like almost excitement to be like entrepreneurs here and now and be like, build solution for here and now. But it's like, by the time you actually get it to market, and like, is that still going to be a reality and a thing that people want when normality does kick back in? So it's this real tension between like, you know, enhancing existing product or not getting too blinded by the shiny new thing that might be coming in, as you say, Nicola.
Yeah, and it's been quite interesting though, because I think it has also opened up opportunities to be quite scrappy. So we wanted to make sure that with homeschooling being incredibly challenging from my small experience of it, we know that there's a lot of parents out there who can't necessarily afford one-to-one tuition, and we wanted to do something that would support a much broader range of parents. So we've been talking for the last year, I think, about doing a level of like online school where it's free tutorials, but for hundreds of kids versus it being one-to-one. So you don't get that real personalized experience, but you can still learn in a live environment and ask questions. So for over a year, we said, oh no, it's too big a project. Really not sure about this. Coronavirus hits and we did it in a week. And it's not perfect. You know, it was quite scrappily done, but it was still adding a huge amount of value to I think on average a class has 200 kids in it. And so it has taken us back a little bit to, it's okay to be scrappy sometimes. It doesn't always need to be perfect. And I think when we thought about it before, we turned it into this very complex project. And actually we did it without any product resource and in a week.
Super interesting. what is your perspective on exactly some of your clients and how they've experienced the hit of the corona, and also potentially how they have adapted to it so far?
I think the whole, pandemic part of it, working from home and so on, hasn't really hit them as much. What really hit them is the uncertainty of the economic downturn, how big it's going to be. And what very quickly happened is that all of a sudden, all of the founders are getting a lot of pressure from the boards to make contingency plans and to figure out what are we going to do next. And when you have to switch your mindset from being growth, the only thing you have to worry about is like, how can you scale fast enough? All of a sudden, you have to start thinking about scaling if you have to scale back. What if those deals don't come through, right? I think one of the things that I thought was the most remarkable and hadn't thought of was at that time in the beginning of March, I was working on 2 recruitment jobs, strategic marketing hires, one in Copenhagen, one in the US. And what happened a week after the lockdown in the respective countries was people stopped being interested in switching. And because they don't want because of the uncertainty, and they don't want to give up their job, right? And this is going to hit the startup industry quite a lot, because if they're not able to get the talent that they need to scale their business from other startups, right, that have some experience, then the ecosystem is not really, it's going to be stuck, and you have people sitting in their places. And I think the early stage startups are completely dependent on people coming in with some experience. They can't just take chances on new hires that have no experience and train them, right? So I think that's one of the things that the fewest have talked about, because it's not just about funding or about revenue. It's also about, can you build the organization that you want? And I was quite surprised that even here in Denmark, where we have wonderful employee conditions, the uncertainty made people decline a better opportunity.
Yeah. So maybe just to dig a bit deeper into this, like, do you see that there are like remarkable changes in terms of how do you grow a B2B company? Like is it still like the inbound outbound split, and of course you need to drive some sort of paid marketing, but you also need to have your sales team running, etc. Like, is there any kind of like clear shifts, or is it just like it is just at a bit maybe at a lower pace than it was before Corona?
I think honestly, I don't see much has changed. Specific industries have been hit, but to be honest, it's still about the same thing. Get qualified leads in, right? It's still the same game, and then optimizing your channels and so on. But I do think this opens up for, because a lot of sales teams have a Q2 that is out the window, right? It's not happening. If they didn't have a good Q1, they are not in a good position right now. So they're hoping for Q3 to really be fruitful, and Q4, but it's still a chancing it, because a lot of companies are, postponing decisions. So I think this is an interesting opportunity for marketing to not just look at the part of the funnel that they own, but also see how can we go in and support sales on a more account-based approach. Say, okay, for the existence of this business, we need to close these deals, and marketing needs to support that, because it doesn't matter if you're filling the funnel and it's getting stuck in the sales part, right? So I think it opens up for going a bit broader with what marketing normally worries about at this stage.
Good point.
Isn't marketing just always there to battle sales teams anyway?
I mean, I think you can do a lot. I'm not saying that marketing can replace sales at all, but there's a lot of support you can do, especially on strategic accounts, like some of the enterprise deals, in terms of specific content and nurturing more of the whole buying center. Like, you can do so much with marketing, and the same tactics as you're using on inbound. And I think it's time to also put them into practice.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that as well, that like, if you are, I mean, I am hearing that it's harder to get meetings. It's probably easy to get people to attend a webinar like we're doing right now. There's 5 every day that you could attend to. But I have heard some feedback that it's hard to get people to respond to a meeting, via marketing automation or outbound. I think I'm also been working with a client in the HR space, which obviously is like really impacted by this. Why would someone buy HR software right now? Of course, they're going to hold back. Especially if it's software to help you hire people. Nobody's doing that today. So I've been trying to help this founder and a few others think about, one, do the maintenance stuff that you were too busy to do before. Content creation, May touched on this, actually good sort of lead nurturing, activation, all these things you've wanted to do but have been too busy making sales or having these meetings. Go back and put that time in and then have that hopeful outlook. I don't think it's going to be the next quarter. I don't think it's going to be this year, but I'm just like, I don't know, maybe being too pessimistic these days. But if we're looking at 6 months of very restrained sales, that's a lot of time to do the things like the organic SEO that you never want to do because it takes so long to show the results. Well, you have that time now. You could put in that effort and do it. And the final piece, I've been working with someone who sells a large HR product and helping them to sort of reshift to how do we sell something much smaller and solving some of the more current needs. So as opposed to them trying to get software used to hire people, actually getting software and using the same software to help re-onboard people as we get closer to that, how to use that software to communicate the health news and health updates. That this was about a month ago, and that was like really key important. So I love this idea. I don't hear this word very much in the Nordics, but in America we call it the beachhead. It's a war term. We love war. And it's like, how do you sell into something small, provide a little bit of value so you can nurture that lead over the next few months and then hopefully sell them, the full enterprise package. So it's not a bad idea to like get in the door and work around their budgets, which are restrained, so you can sell them something bigger at a later time.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Sean. I think also I've heard a lot of people like trying to adapt that product into some sort of freemium solution, right?
Yep.
You can actually get in there and actually, because right now, as you say, like all budgets are just like, forget about it if you're going B2B, and nobody's daring kind of like to suggest any kind of like new initiatives also because they will be laughed at this moment. So, but this part about like actually being able to introduce your product as a freemium solution, and then just like believe that, of course, if you deliver something good, that you can actually make proper sales later on.
There's a good local example in Denmark. Jonas, he's going to hate me if I get his company name wrong, but I want to say it's called Pento. They do payroll software. Another example of and they do payroll software, I think mostly in the UK. Really hard to sell new payroll software right now. So they made a furlough calculator. That's what everyone needed. That was the immediate need. I need to understand my sort of calculation around furlough. And they have this beautiful branding and lead generation tool. Probably took them a week to make. And they have this sort of beautiful thing, provide some value, get to know the people, and then hope that you can engage that contact when people are looking to make that type of purchase.
And Sean, I think that's just the most valuable comment. What we talk a lot about in the B2B space in the UK at the moment is very much about using this time to really build a connection with your existing customers and your potential customers. Now, this is obviously something we'd love to do all year round in any sort of environment, but we don't. And now we've got this time. Let's think about what they really need and what's really going to support them versus trying to sell. And that way, when they do come to that point, when they are thinking about a new payroll solution or whatever it is, you're going to be front of mind because they trust you, they value your content and their relationship with you. And so I think it's about thinking, what can I do now for those potential customers, my existing customers, that will be really support me in the long term as well.
I totally agree. And Pento is a Seedcamp company, so we're very happy with what they're getting up to there, but also not just as a way to sort of engage with existing companies, but also to launch businesses. So another portfolio company of ours who are brand new and not even in market yet, they're called Ben, and they're a sort of rewards card so that you as employers can give to your employees to basically spend on rewards that are actually things that are meaningful to you rather than these kind of like generic plans that you potentially get put onto. And they're pre-launch, but what they did was think, well, HR teams are probably under like the cosh right now and having a really difficult time, like trying to think around how to support their teams, like totally like things thrown up in the air for them. And who's actually catering for them? Because they're spending all of their time having to think about their employees. So what they did was create this digital care package, not asking them to do anything, but really thinking around like how are ways in which we can help you support your teams right now, building a really great sort of suite of offers, not taking any sort of cut or anything, reaching out to HR people as part of this. And obviously, it's a great marketing tool in terms of building their funnel and contact book and building goodwill for when they are ready to go to market.
Very interesting. I think we actually could just have a short stop here and then actually take one question. I think I have one here, which I think is quite interesting in relating to what we are going towards, which is the more kind of like operational stuff. So it's an anonymous attendee. So unfortunately, I cannot like tell who asked this brilliant question. But what is your take on getting the customer journey right at this time? And here the person is very especially referring to the part about like when you get the customers or the leads in from marketing, the MQLs, and you drive them over to become the SQLs, and you actually drive them over to become sales, and then the post sales, right? Like how do you improve the handover during these times, and is there something that have changed recently on how you do this process? What do you say, Mike?
Yeah, I can speak to that. This handover between marketing and sales is like my pet peeve number one, and I have been known to run between floors to get sales to get all my leads. But what I think is if anything, this shows if you had processes that weren't working, it has been blown up now, right? Because you're not being able to walk over to people or talk across the desk. And in terms of handling leads at any stage in the funnel, really, is very much a tech question, right? Do you have the right technology in place? Are you doing the right automation? Do you have the right processes? And with that, also education. And I think if you're experiencing any like you can always improve the conversion rate between MQL and SQL. But if you think that you can improve it, this is a good time to look at do you have the right qualification criteria? Do you have the right tech to support your processes? Are your sales reps educated on that process and how to handle them? And it's very simple things that you can do in terms of just establishing what I call a service level agreement between sales and marketing. Same for between sales and then customer success in terms of how do we handle it, or what is the time frame, what should be done, and all checking all the boxes. And this is a great time to look at that because I think most companies that I work with are not operating with actual documented processes that are supported with tech.
Good point. Good point.
Sorry, I just wanted to add in, I am so pleased you said have an SLA between marketing and sales. I teach a little bit about sales and marketing alignment because it's such a big challenge. I think there's like $1 trillion lost every year because of a lack of alignment. And it's something we really push. And I think the stats are something like 25% of B2B companies have an SLA between sales and marketing, and those that do see 90% improvement. So why would you not?
No, I think it's a very easy optimization point, and at the same time you have to think about sales and marketing are always a little bit, there's always some friction, and there should be healthy competition, but it doesn't help. You have to work together. Right now, marketing might be okay. Sales reps are very hard hit by this. Like their pipeline is not moving, right? They're as Sean said, they're not getting those meetings. This is extremely demotivating, and they might even not even get their salary, right? So the commission. So this is a really good time for marketing to kind of take the leading role on establishing this relationship and look each other in the eye and say, okay, how are we going to collaborate moving forward? And because otherwise you risk that this actually ends up making a bigger disparity between sales and marketing, because it's the ones that are not getting meetings that have nothing to do, and marketing that are doing okay.
Very interesting, man.
Yeah, I wanted to pipe in a little bit on what I mostly see is the founder-led sales. So some of us here are in more like mature organizations, and you have a defined sales and marketing department, perhaps. But I work with a lot of, and perhaps maybe some of our viewers are they're like the founder is doing all the sales. So I think I wanted to touch a little bit on that, just to say what I've been coaching founders on a little bit is like not to be so forceful of like book a demo, but even get more into sort of customer interview time, which is great for when you're at that small stage and you don't have salespeople. So as opposed to saying, book a demo now with me in the outbound, I would love to compare some notes with you. I'd love to share what we're seeing from our other customers, just changing the language ever so much to get a little bit more interaction, reduce some of that pressure around booking the meeting, because the customer knows they're going to be in the sales pipeline and they're probably not buying anything this quarter, maybe not this year. So for those of you like solo founders out there, I know everyone hates to do this in the early stage, but talk to your damn customers. Like, you can never do enough of that in the early stage as you're getting to know. And we've touched on this, but now you're just building more value. I like that idea of like, I've heard something, I've learned something. These are what our customers are doing to manage during COVID. I want to share that with you. So a bit more on the lead nurturing side, something maybe the founder-led sales team can do in the meantime.
Very good point. If we then actually go a bit more, even further into some of the channels that exist within marketing and growth, like, are there any like clear signs of, obviously, like, events doesn't make much sense at the moment, at least offline events, but are there other elements that you think, we also talked about that the paid marketing is definitely having a lower price right now? If the performance is as good, like, that actually sounds like a good thing, but other than that, like, what is your view on the various channels to be used during this stage we're at, and also in the future? What do you think? What do you think, Natasha? Like, what across your portfolio? Like, what are you seeing that the ones that are growing or the ones that are focusing on growth? Where are they kind of like putting their money into or their time into?
I think I always sort of see the same problem, which is people rely too strongly on this belief that there is this one golden channel, and you have this bullet, and like, boom, you go and you grow like forever at this amazing like rate, and your CPM sort of stay the same, and eventually you always hit a wall. So I guess like the thing that I always try and work with people on is this idea of actually like building this cohesive like brand story, and then really thinking around like, who are the people that you're trying to reach, who is that disproportionately influential customer, and actually where are they, and then what is the channel or the mix of channels in order to get to them. I think, you know, it's going to be an interesting potential leveler at the moment, because people who had perhaps turned away from channels such as Facebook as they've become more expensive perhaps start coming back as they've become, you know, way cheaper depending on, you know, the sort of sectors that you're in, and also for companies who, you know, who are well funded and who are in sort of markets where they're actually growing right now. There's nothing to say that they shouldn't be spending on marketing. I guess, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see how more traditional channels like out of home, you know, how they sort of come back. I think there's a belief in that market that there's going to be this kind of like jubilant return as soon as we're all outside, and people are going to want to start putting their money back into that sort of medium. And there's definitely been this interesting sort of shift change in definitely with tech companies. It was always like this allergy to anything that was unmeasurable before. And so things like out of home were just like, oh no. And then all of a sudden, like, you can't move on the tube in London for seeing startups. I don't think it's all I ever see actually in terms of like on the tube in London right now. And so it'll be interesting if people move back into that sort of more like digital first, you know, sort of approach when it comes to thinking about channel. And, you know, I wonder if it will, like, my hope is that it might inspire a bit more creativity, because we're all having to think a bit more creatively, you know, right now around like how we reach people and what we do.
It's really interesting seeing how some of these media owners are being incredibly creative as well. So out of home has obviously dropped enormously, but what they've started doing is packages around supermarkets and pharmacies, which are open, so you can just advertise around those. But I mean, for some stats, TV viewing's up 30%, but the cost is down 50%. The same with radio, which is up 15%. I think the other really interesting channel is direct mail, because obviously everyone's working remote. So how do you handle that? Well, a lot of the direct mail companies now have the opportunity where you can send out a link to one of your clients and say, I'd like to send you something. They click on the link, and then they can choose whether or not they want to add in their own personal address for it to be sent to. So we're testing this out next week, where we're sending, going back to what you were saying, Natasha, about care packages, we're sending these out to some of the teachers who are obviously in incredibly difficult situations at the moment. And we're going to use this, can we send it to their home? So it's going to be really interesting to see how many of them are open to actually giving out their home address to receive direct mail from businesses. So I'll report back on that one. For us, we were actually about to do a big above the line campaign in September, and it was mostly going to be focused around out of home, tube, and buses. Obviously, we're not going to be doing that now, but we're going to be repurposing that spend into TV, because it's so cheap at the moment. And actually for us, it's a really key time for us to be driving that education and awareness of how we can support parents and kids with their education as they move into the next academic year. And I think businesses need to be really careful about not cutting back too much on their marketing spend, because you want to make sure that your brand is still there front of mind in front of your clients and your potential clients. And what you don't want to happen is cut back right now, and then when everything does open up again and you start to market, they've forgotten who you are and you have to start from the beginning again.
I also think, I think TV is such a like overlooked channel, especially in startups. Very few of our companies have done it, and those who have, like, their conversion has gone up and their costs have actually come down significantly. And there was a great video sort of doing the rounds of how the big brands are responding to COVID, and like literally everything sounds the same, and I'm genuinely like disappointed. And I think here's like a real opportunity again for sort of startups and younger emerging businesses to think more creatively. Like, everyone right now is using stock imagery and the same messaging. It's like, what is the message that's actually true to your brand? Why do you need to be here and now for people? What do they care about? What is that story? And then how are you like bringing it to life visually? Like, what's happened to like graphic design and illustration and all these things that we can actually be creating remotely and that no one's really doing? It feels like everything just feels a little bit vanilla, and actually now is the time to not be vanilla, and it's where like people can really take off if they just give themselves the like license, I guess, that it's okay to do that.
And I think as you see prices come right down, there's also some amazing offers out there. Like, I think the Royal Mail in the UK are offering free postage for businesses up to £50,000 for the rest of the year. I think Sky Digital are offering incredible deals for startups to buy very, very cheap TV advertising. So, with smaller budgets, you've got to get more creative in terms of that. As you say, you don't necessarily just want to go to a big advertising agency, put something together. You can get really creative and do some amazing stuff using graphics and illustration and some of your case studies to tell that story that's most relevant to your customers, and start experimenting with some other channels too. I think it's a great opportunity to be really creative.
I think it's a great challenge for the founders that are watching. Like, you're so right. I'm like, the hotel I stayed at 7 years ago has told me that we're in this together and this is what they're doing to keep things clean. And it's like, what a wasted opportunity of and to hit your entire mailing list with that. So I agree. Be bold. TV, yes, and YouTube is, I guess, the cheaper equivalent, which has always been like underutilized. People are at home. They want to learn. They want to like consume a lot more. So you got to like get creative and find how to sort of wedge into those opportunities and share some knowledge, as opposed to just sign up now as the call to action. So I love that challenge. Yeah, it's like founders listening to this, like, and you're Danes too, you're bold, like by design, like get out there and like push the envelope. I haven't seen very much of that, to be honest.
Yeah, I really like that. I think also Nicola saying that earlier, it's like, because of this crisis and because we are all in this together to some extent, I think before Corona, like the bar was pretty high. Maybe also something that you were referring to, Natasha, that it became a bit vanilla, because like the bar was so high. It's like everybody like was just doing the same thing, and everything was so kind of like well developed, and there wasn't one thing you could do that wasn't already done. But now I think like the world has just changed really, really fast, and we are all kind of like we're all back to zero to some extent in terms of how to communicate and how to position yourself, so you can do some things that haven't been done before, also referring to some of the things you're saying.
I also bouncing off what Sean is saying, I think what we have to think about now is that in the B2B market, people are now in their homes. Like, the line between being at work, being at home has blurred completely. People are experiencing a lot more free time. They're making sourdoughs, they're planting tomatoes, they're doing all sorts of weird things that they normally don't do. I'm on it myself. And the thing is that there's still this, it's opened up for people wanting to learn something new, reading new books, learning something, being better at their field. And I think you can tap into that with working on something a bit media content on the B2B side, and not just being like headline blog post trying to get some clicks in, but really saying, how can you be a source of education for your prospective customers? How can you help them navigate this situation better and in their field naturally? And speaking to also in terms of media channels, one of the things that think is very underutilized in the B2B space is audio. Audio is booming on the B2B side. People are consuming content while they're doing dishes, while they're cooking, while they're doing their sourdough starter, whatever. People really like to have their earbuds in, and being on video and, you know, reading a PDF, like who reads PDF anymore? I don't do it. But, you know, people have changed the way they consume because they're doing things, multiple things at a time. Having a good narrator on your content and doing audio content, doing podcasts, whatever, you have the time right now. So why not get your product team together with some customers and talk about how to, you know, whatever, you know, there's a potential to utilize a channel that all of your customers are doing in their private life already.
Very good point. Very good point. Okay, actually, I think it's time for another question. We have an interesting one here, I think, which focuses a lot on the whole situation for freelancers and the connection for freelancers to startups. So, like, how is it that we see that the playing field is going to change for freelancers, and also in connection to that a lot of startups are relying on freelancers also in a lot of their growth work. We all know that we need to have done those assets for the marketing campaign, and our designer doesn't really have time, or we like to have one that is super good at Google AdWords, so we get this person in. But in these in these times where we talked before, budgets are really tight, it's really hard for freelancers.
Is it? I mean, I don't
think it's not,
100%, but or is it going to be easier because people don't have the budget for a full-time employee? So actually there's going to be more demand, like, to have like a kind of bigger collective of freelancers. And then, you know, there are lots of brilliant portals and platforms like Twine for freelancers looking for roles, or things like the Dots in the creative industry, you know, as well on the sort of like VC side of things. Like, loads of us now, you know, ourselves included at Seedcamp, are building sort of talent pools and job portals, really sort of thinking around how you connect talent to, you know, actual available jobs out there. And that's actually been a really interesting thing, balancing it from a messaging perspective, you know, because there are a lot of companies who are still hiring, and there are senior roles that are still available, but balancing that with, you know, a huge amount of the workforce currently out of employment, and not wanting to make it look like it's this crazy dynamic sort of market, because we know it's not. But I think we need to shift this narrative that there is, you know, because there are things out there, especially in sort of growing, like fast growing businesses, and there are tools and platforms, and I'm happy to sort of include like some of those in here. But yeah, I think it's still early days, but it'll be interesting to see whether there is a shift towards like more sort of freelance work rather than full-time in the short term.
I think what's important, if it is quiet right now, is to really work on building out your portfolio, so that when there is work available, you've got some fantastic examples to show all these clients. And often when you're really busy, you don't have that time. So make sure you're not just putting together everything you've done in the past, but also coming up with some new and fun ideas and being really creative as you have that time, and sharing those within these communities and within LinkedIn, because that's how we're all going to be finding freelancers over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's a great time. And I was actually in the process of moving back to America. I was looking for my next CMO job. That was in February. So I immediately stopped because, like, yeah, it was obvious that it wasn't happening. And I was really worried because, I need to have some stable income. You know, I was been going back and forth my whole career between CMO, VP to consultant, and vice versa. I've never had more inbound or more work than I have now. And it's great because I'm in a small town village. I got nothing to do. I'm just cranking out client work. So I think the worst thing you can have right now is a full-time job. Sorry, I know some of my panelists do, but you're dependent on one company, and we just don't know what the certainty is. In America, it's awful in this situation. It's tied into your healthcare, and you could lose that. So it's like, no, I think it's great for freelancers. Yeah, Nicola made a great point, and that's what I did too. When I knew I was going to be consulting for the next 6 months, update the website, update the LinkedIn, start to write, start to do outreach, wrote another book. I wrote a book about startup accelerators, which is also bad timing because nobody's doing new accelerators now, but still I was able to like get that out and get some jobs doing virtual accelerators. So I agree, like you got to put the time in. If you sit at home and you don't do anything and you day drink, yeah, you're not going to get much work. But if you're pushing yourself out, if you're writing, like now is the great time. That's what I love right now. Everyone's blogging. It feels like it's like 2006 again. Like you can do that as a freelancer. If you're passionate about something, just keep, pushing it out there.
Yeah, I think with freelancers, I love to use freelancers, but there's a lot of like management in it. I think as freelancer you can package your services a little better. So sometimes when you have to tell them what to do all the time, it does become a bit more strenuous relationship where you want to use the same freelancers over and over again. But in the initial getting them in the door, I think freelance can help looking a bit at how some more established agencies package their stuff and kind of say, I can do, for example, designers, right? I can do this social media package. So I got all your LinkedIn updates for the next 2 months, like something like that, right? Or your blog content. Tap into that. Also look who's at the team. Like invite the specific person that you think will be the one hiring you in, and I will look at it and then attach your portfolio. Always attach your portfolio when reaching out. And I think this is a great time because there's a lot of people that are looking at whether to keep people on a full-time payroll or something can go over to freelancers. So this is the right time to reach out.
All right. I think we're kind of like getting towards the end of this fantastic conversation. I think it's been a lot of very, very good inputs. I think finally, just like if you can try to keep it as short as possible, like what are we looking into? Like how long will this go for? Like have the way we're gonna grow companies change forever? Or are we actually kind of like not seeing that big of a change and it's more like alterations that will gradually adjust to how it was before? Does anyone dare to answer that?
I can take that one. I think it's going to be dependent on which country you're in, to be honest. There are some countries that are coming out of this a lot easier and some are very, very hardly hit. And they're going to take years and years because it's going to affect every single level in the society. I'm very fortunate to be based here in Copenhagen. We are fairly all right. I think we are going to be, people are going to not forget because this is going to continue, but because we're coming back to a sense of normality very quickly. I think in the next 6 months, you will see businesses picking up on decisions and maybe having a bit of a shock. I think in other countries, this will take a very, very long time and you cannot expect things to change in this year. Like it's more like 2021, 2022.
Good point.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think whatever the outcome is, this is a real opportunity for us to put into place some of those fundamentals that many of us who've been so focused on this like exponential hockey stick growth that you've forgotten about.
Yeah.
And what it comes down to is it's all about your customers and your potential customers and what their needs are. And they may well change rapidly. I mean, we're seeing different messaging coming in every day. I speak to my sales team 3 times a day now, which I always should have, but I used to speak to them, once a week. And I think it's going back to what Natasha said. It's about listening to what their problems are and their needs and how can you best solve them. And the companies that are going to make it through this are the ones that are really thinking about their customers. It's not about having the biggest budgets, the biggest brand. It's about providing what your customer needs.
And then remember the long-term part that I really like that you brought up, Nicola, that right now things are different and you might get overwhelmed by a lot of intake, but it is about like, who can you actually keep in 6 months from now that you're not going to suddenly see like a huge churn and that you've seen that you actually spend your time on the wrong customers.
Yeah, it's your core customer base.
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, really hard to answer. I feel like the world was changing every week. Now it's changing every month. Maybe soon it'll only be changing every quarter. So we do feel some stability. I would say, yeah, it is survival of the fittest. So, get really, really fit. Be ready for the long term. If you don't have 10 months cash in the bank, try and think about what you can do to get there fast. So I think better to err on the side of caution. Doing things that really, really matter. It's a lot of this like 80-20 rule, only 20% of what you do matters. Now more than ever, you got to really figure out what that is and be focused in on it. So I think it's a challenging time. I think, yeah, some countries better than others, as May was saying, but yeah, it's a slow recovery, but there is opportunity in the new recovery. And we may come back to where we are now in 6 months, in a year. Nobody knows. So it's like, look for the opportunities there. And there is some positives. I think we're finally, it's kind of like when you go through, I don't know, like an addiction where it's like denial and all these stages, we're kind of getting a little bit into acceptance and moving on to what is going to happen next. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to be the total pessimist here, but like, yeah, it's tough times for sure, at least for this year.
All right. I think I always like to round off with like, is there any kind of like new tool that we all need to know about? Like I think growth and and building marketing, it's always interesting to talk about the tools. Any new tools that you come across lately that you think we all should look into?
I think for me, the one that's really interesting is the ability to send direct mail to people's homes with permission. So the company that I use is called Matter. They're only in the UK, but quite a few other direct mail agencies are starting to look at that. And I think that's a really interesting way to cut through some of the online noise.
Fantastic.
Totally pushing one of our portfolio companies, but Hopin, HOPIN.TO. I think, you know, if you think about marketing budgets, a lot gets spent and often wasted on events and things that aren't scalable. So thinking of ways to translate often very expensive marketing activities and really think about like building collaboration and bringing people together in a meaningful way online. I think things like Hopin can be really interesting for that.
All right. I think we are running out of time, and I think it's been a pleasure. I think it's been really, really good. Very fantastic conversations, fantastic discussions. Very much appreciated for all of you to take the time to share your experiences and your thoughts. So yeah, I think that's the only thing that is left to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much,
Thank
everyone.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.